Chapter 1 The Call of the Mountains. Now, in the heart of Wyoming Territory, the town of Cheyenne wasn't much more than a speck on the map. But come summertime, it transformed into a rip-roaring spectacle. The MtMan Rendezvous, they call it. A congregation of the wildest, wooliest bunch of fellas you'd ever lay eyes on. Mountain men, trappers, traders, and the like, all drawn together like moths to a flame by the promise of tall tales, strong spirits, and the chance to swap their hard-earned pelts for a bit of civilization's shine. For young Jack Freeman, a sprout of a lad with eyes as bright as a mountain stream, the MtMan Rendezvous was more than just a summer gathering. It was a portal to a world of adventure, a glimpse into the lives and legends he'd heard whispered around campfires. Each summer, he'd tag along with his pa, Mike Freeman, a fur trader with a nose for profit, sharper than a hawk's beak, and a heart as tough as a bear's hide. Mike Freeman, a shrewd Englishman with ambition that could outclimb a mountain goat, had always yearned for a life beyond the soot-stained streets of London. When he whispers of a new religious movement, the Mormon Church, reached his ears, promising a fresh start in a land of opportunity in the American West, Mike's heart quickened with a thrill of the unknown. In 1866, he packed up his wife, Emma, their two youngins, Jack and Kathleen, and set sail across the vast Atlantic. They braved storms that'd make a sailor swear off the sea, diseases that'd make a doctor scratch his head, and the ever-present threat of bandits and hostile Indians. But Mike, with his iron will and Emma's steady hand on the reins, preserved their faith in the Mormon Church and their dreams of a better life their guiding star. They landed in Salt Lake City, a fledgling settlement in the heart of the unforgiving Utah Territory. Life was as tough as a boiled owl, with the Freemans, like many others, carving out a meager existence in a humble dugout. But Mike, bless his entrepreneurial spirit, saw opportunity where others only saw hardship. He dove head first into the fur trade, his travels taking him to the rowdiest rendezvous in Jackson Hole, Cody, and even the wild frontier town of Butte, Montana. He bartered with trappers and traders, his silver tongue and sharp eye for quality furs, earning him a reputation as a man who could smell a good deal a mile off. Along the way, he rubbed elbows with the likes of Jim Bridger, the legendary mountain man whose tales of adventure would later ignite a fire in young Jack's heart. He even crossed paths with the infamous Butch Cassidy, a charming rogue with a penchant for trouble. Through sheer grit, a bit of luck, and a whole lot of horse sense, Mike's fur trading business thrived. He built a comfortable home for his family in Salt Lake City, a testament to his hard work and unwavering belief in the American dream. But even as he prospered, he never forgot the struggles of his early days, the sacrifices he'd made, and the unyielding faith that had brought him and his family to the new land. Meanwhile, young Jack, his eyes wide with wonder, soaked up the sights and sounds of the rendezvous. The smell of wood smoke, cured meats, and the sweet aroma of pipe tobacco filled the air, a heady concoction that stirred his soul. But it was the stories told around the campfire, tales of daring exploits and narrow escapes, that truly captured his imagination. These were the stories of legends of men who'd faced the wilderness and emerged victorious, their spirits unbroken. And as Jack listened, a seed was planted in his young heart, a seed that would one day grow into a thirst for adventure, a yearning for a life lived on his own terms in the heart of the wild. One sweltering summer evening, as the sun painted the sky with hues of fiery orange and deep purple, young Jack found himself drawn to the tales of a grizzled mountain man named Old Joe Hiddenbear. Now, Old Joe Hiddenbear, he weren't your average campfire storyteller. He was a man of mystery, his past shrouded in shadows and whispers. Word around the campfire was that Old Joe had been just a babe when his family was ambushed by a band of Crow warriors. Their greed was insatiable as a swarm of locusts. They left nothing but the ashes of sorrow in their wake, but somehow, little Joe had survived. hidden away like a rabbit in a briar patch. The Crow Chief, a man with a heart as big as a Montana sky, found the orphan babe and took pity on him. He gave the child to his sister, Little Bear, a woman with a heart full of love but a womb that had never borne fruit. She raised Joe as her own, teaching him the ways of the crow, the secrets of the land, and the wisdom of the spirits. Young Joe, now Hidden Bear, grew up strong and true. His spirit as wild and untamed as the mountains themselves. But as he reached manhood, a restlessness stirred within him, a yearning for something more. He left the tribe, taking with him the name Joe, a simple moniker that hid a past filled with both sorrow and resilience. He wandered the wilderness, a solitary figure seeking his place in the world. He learned the ways of the mountain men, the trappers and the traders who roamed the wild frontier. He honed his skills, sharpened his instincts, and became a legend in his own right, a man known simply as Old Joe. As Old Joe spun his yarns that night, his voice a gravelly echo of the countless trials he'd faced, Jack listened with rapt attention. The old man's tales of survival, of courage in the face of adversity, and of the deep connection between man and nature struck a chord deep within Jack's soul. It was as if a fire had been lit within him, a burning desire to follow in Old Joe's footsteps, to embrace the wild and forge his own path in the untamed wilderness. From that moment on, Jack knew his destiny lay not in the civilized world, but in the heart of the mountains, where the spirit of the mountain man lived on. As the years rolled by, Jack's hankering for the mountains grew stronger than a grizzly's appetite. He soaked up every scrap of knowledge and skill them mountain men had to offer, like a sponge in a rainstorm. He learned to track elk through the snow, trap beaver with cunning, and navigate the treacherous peaks with the sure-footedness of a mountain goat. By the time he was 18, Jack was itching to strike out on his own, eager to test his mettle against the wild. He figured it was high time he asked his pa for his blessing, and maybe a bit of coin to get him started. But fate, it seems, had other plans. One scorcher of a summer day, as the sun beat down on the rendezvous like a blacksmith's hammer, Jack felt a bony hand clap him on the shoulder. He turned to find Old Joe Hidden Bear, a grizzled trapper with a face like a well-worn map, grinning at him through a thicket of whiskers. "Well, I'll be flabbergasted," Old Joe rasped, his voice like the creak of an old saddle, "if it ain't young Jack Freeman, all growed up and looking fit to bust out of them store-bought britches." Jack grinned back, a spark of excitement in his eyes. "Old Joe, good to see you. What brings you around these parts?" Old Joe spat a stream of tobacco juice into the dirt, a thoughtful look clouding his weathered features. "Been meaning to ask you something, Jack. My old cabin up in the mountains is looking a mite worse for wear, and these old bones ain't what they used to be. I need a strapping young buck like yourself to help me fix her up." Jack's heart leaped like a trout in a mountain stream. This was his chance, the opportunity he'd been dreaming of. "You name it, Old Joe," he said, his voice ringing with eagerness. "I'm your man." Old Joe's grin widened, revealing a gap where a tooth or two had gone missing. "That's what I like to hear, son. You help me get that cabin back in shape, and I'll make it worth your while. Finest furs you'll find this side of Mississippi, I promise you." Jack didn't need any more convincing. A deal was struck with a hearty handshake, and the next morning, as the first rays of sunlight kissed the mountaintops, Jack and Old Joe set off on horseback, leaving the bustling rendezvous behind and venturing into the heart of the untamed wilderness. With the first rays of dawn painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, Jack and Old Joe bid farewell to the hustle and bustle of the rendezvous, their trusty steeds carrying them deeper into the heart of the mountains. The air grew crisp and clean, the scent of pine needles and damp earth filling their lungs as they rode. Jack's heart thumped with excitement, the promise of adventure tingling in his veins like a swig of good whiskey. Weeks turned into a blur of sweat and sawdust as they toiled away at the cabin. Old Joe, with his weathered hands and a lifetime of mountain wisdom, taught Jack the tricks of the trade. They felled towering pines, their axes ringing out like church bells in the stillness of the forest. They notched and fitted logs with the precision of a master carpenter, their muscles straining as they hoisted heavy beams into place. The work was back-breaking, but Jack reveled in it. He learned to read the signs of the forest, to track deer through the undergrowth, and to predict the weather with uncanny accuracy. Old Joe, in turn, shared stories of his own adventures, tales of close calls with grizzlies, daring rescues, and the quiet solitude of a life lived in harmony with nature. As the cabin took shape, so too did Jack's understanding of the mountain man's way of life. He came to appreciate the simple pleasures of a warm fire, a hearty meal, and the companionship of a kindred spirit. He learned that freedom wasn't found in the crowded saloons and dusty streets of town, but in the vast expanse of the wilderness, where a man could be truly himself. By the time the last shingle was nailed in place, the cabin stood a testament to their hard work and newfound friendship. It was more than just a shelter. It was a home, a sanctuary from the storms of life. Jack and old Joe stood back, wiping the sweat from their brows, a shared sense of pride swelling in their chests. They had built something together, something that would endure long after they were gone. And in that moment, Jack knew he had found his true calling. A life lived in the shadow of the mountains, a life filled with adventure, hardship, and the quiet satisfaction of a job well done. With the last log snug in its place, old Joe turned to Jack, a twinkle in his eye and a hint of pride in his weathered face. "Well, I'll be a ring-tailed roar," he declared, clapping a calloused hand on Jack's shoulder. "You've done a bang-up job, son. Got the grit, determination of a true mountain man, you do. Proud to have shared this old cabin with you." Jack, his heart swelling with gratitude, could only nod in response. The bond he'd forged with old Joe was stronger than any nail or beam, a friendship built on shared sweat and the quiet understanding that comes from facing the wilderness together. As they stood there, the wind whistling a tune through the pines and the mountains stretching out like a rumpled blanket, Jack knew he'd found his place in the world. He was home. But old Joe, ever the practical one, wasn't about to let sentimentality get in the way of survival. "Now, Jack," he said, his voice gruff but kind, "we best be getting ourselves some supplies for the winter. Can't be living on nothing but squirrel stew and pine needle tea, now can we?" Jack, a bit taken aback, replied, "But old Joe, we got all the game we could ever need right outside our doorstep." Old Joe chuckled, a sound like dry leaves rustling in the wind. "True enough, son, but a man needs more than just meat to keep his belly full and his spirits high. We need flour for flapjacks, beans for bacon, and a good supply of coffee to keep the chill at bay. And I hear tell there's a railroad camp down yonder, about 10 miles or so, where we can barter for some supplies." Jack's eyes lit up like a pair of fireflies. "Sounds like an adventure, old Joe. When do we set out?" Old Joe slapped his knee, a wide grin splitting his face. "First light tomorrow, son. So get yourself a good night's rest. We've got a long day ahead of us." As the first whispers of autumn danced through the Montana air, Jack and old Joe found themselves stepping into a saloon that could have been plucked straight out of a 10-cent novel. The air hung heavy with the scent of spilled whiskey and unfulfilled dreams. The only light coming from a few flickering oil lamps that cast long dancing shadows on the walls. They made their way to the bar, their boots kicking up dust on the creaky wooden floorboards. A barkeep with a handlebar mustache that'd make a walrus jealous slid them a pair of frothy mugs, the amber liquid within promising warmth against the encroaching chill. Tucked away in a shadowy corner, a lone figure nursed a glass of whiskey, his face etched with the lines of a life lived hard. Something about him caught Jack's eye, a certain air of refinement that didn't quite fit the rough and tumble crowd. "Mind if I mosey over and have a chinwag with a fella?" Jack asked old Joe, his curiosity piqued. Old Joe, ever the pragmatist, shrugged. "Suit yourself, son. Just don't go getting in any trouble." Jack ambled over to the stranger. A friendly grin spread across his face. "Howdy, stranger," he drawled, extended hand. "Name's Jack Freeman. And here's my partner, old Joe Hiddenbear. We're just passing through, stocking up for the winter. Couldn't help but notice your accent. You hail from foreign parts, I reckon?" The stranger, startled by the interruption, looked up with a flicker of surprise in his eyes, but it quickly melted into a warm smile, as genuine as a gold nugget. "William Frankham, at your service," he replied, his voice a melodious blend of British charm and a hint of something more exotic. "Blacksmith by trade, originally from Bristol, but my family and I recently found ourselves transplanted to the wilds of South Africa." He gestured towards the empty chairs at his table, a silent invitation to join him. "Pull up a chair, gents. The night is young, and the whiskey's a-flowin'." William, a man with a heart as sturdy as the iron he forged, had a story as twisty as a mountain trail. His family, hailing from England, had sought their fortune in South Africa, amidst the sprawling vineyards and bustling port of Cape Town. It was there, under the blazing African sun, that they crossed paths with Mormon missionaries, their fiery sermons and promises of a new Zion igniting a spark of faith within their hearts. In 1865, William and his brother Joseph, eager to answer the call of their newfound faith, embarked on a perilous journey across the Atlantic to the promised land of Salt Lake City. Their voyage was a trial by fire. The ship tossed about like a cork in a hurricane, claiming the lives of several souls aboard. Upon reaching American shores, they joined a wagon train of fellow Mormon pioneers. Their journey westward fraught with danger and hardship. They faced hostile tribes, unforgiving weather, and the ever-present threat of disease. But through it all, their faith remained unwavering, a beacon of hope in the vast wilderness. 2 years later, the rest of the Frankham clan, a brood of 9 children and their wary parents, followed in William and Joseph's footsteps, their hearts filled with both hope and trepidation. Among them was Samuel, William's younger brother, a devout Mormon who'd take to the particular practice of polygamy, a decision that caused quite a stir amongst the family and the community at large. William, though raised in the Mormon tradition, never quite caught it on to the idea of multiple wives. He was a practical man, his mind more occupied with the clang of his hammer and the heat of his forge than the finer points of theology. He'd learned his trade from his Uncle Harold back in Cape Town, and his skills were in high demand in the growing Mormon settlement. As William and Joseph made their way west from New York, they found themselves amidst a sprawling wagon train, a veritable Noah's Ark of humanity bound for the promised land of Salt Lake City. The brothers, eager to prove their worth, quickly became indispensable members of the community, their blacksmithing skills a godsend for broken axles, busted wheels, and all manner of mechanical mishaps that plagued the journey. Under the vast canvas of the prairie sky, William's forge became a gathering place, a beacon of warmth and camaraderie in the heart of the wilderness. Around the crackling fire, he swapped stories with fellow travelers, their tales as varied and colorful as the patchwork of quilts that adorned their wagons. There were Civil War veterans, their bodies bearing the scars of battle, their eyes haunted by the ghosts of fallen comrades. They spoke of the horrors they had witnessed, the senselessness of war and the longing for a peaceful life in the untamed West. There were immigrants from distant lands, their faces etched with the hope of uncertainty of a new beginning. They shared their dreams of prosperity, their fears of the unknown, and their unwavering faith in the promise of a better life in Zion. And then there were the rogues and scoundrels, drawn to the wagon train like flies to honey, their eyes glinting with greed and their hearts filled with malice. William, with his keen eye for character and his unwavering moral compass, could spot these varmints a mile off. He kept a watchful eye on them, his hammer always within reach, ready to defend his fellow travelers from those who sought to exploit their vulnerability. Through it all, William remained a pillar of strength and compassion, his heart open to the stories and struggles of those around him. He learned from their experiences, their triumphs, and their tragedies, and his understanding of the human spirit deepened within each encounter. The journey westward was not merely a physical one, but a spiritual odyssey, a forging of character in the crucible of the wild. And as William worked his forge, shaping metal into tools of survival and symbols of hope, he knew that he was not just building a new life for himself, but also contributing to the collective dream of a community united in faith and purpose. Through it all, William remained true to himself, a man of integrity and compassion, his heart open to the experiences and perspectives of those he met along the way. As the night wore on, fueled by whiskey and good conversation, the trio delved into their stories. William recounted his family's journey from South Africa to America, drawn by the siren song of the Mormon faith. His father, a prosperous merchant in Cape Town, had answered the call. William, trained as a blacksmith by his uncle, had found work with the Union Pacific Railroad, his skills in high demand as the iron horse pushed its way westward. Jack, in turn, shared his own family's Mormon roots, their migration from Illinois to Salt Lake City, and his own yearning for the untamed wilderness. As the conversation flowed, William spoke of his own spiritual journey, his voice tinged with a hint of doubt. "I've always been a man of faith," he confessed, "but I must admit, some of the teachings don't sit quite right with me. Brigham Young, bless his soul, seems to have a knack for bending the truth to suit his own purposes." Old Joe, intrigued, leaned forward, his eyes twinkling in the dim light. "How so?" he inquired, taking a long swig of his beer. William, leaning in with the intensity of a preacher at a revival, continued. "Now, take old Joseph Smith, the founder of our faith. He weren't just a prophet, mind you, but a philosopher too. He spoke of a time before time, when the universe weren't nothing but a twinkle in the Almighty's eye. A time when only the power of intelligences existed, like sparks in the darkness. And it was through this power, he said, that God created everything we see and touch and feel." Jack, always a sucker for a good yarn, leaned in closer, his eyes wide with fascination. "That's a humdinger of a tale, William. Never heard it told quite like that before. Makes a fella ponder, don't it? The how and why of it all?" William nodded, a thoughtful look on his face. "Indeed it does, Jack. Sometimes when I'm hammering away at the forge, the sparks are flying like a swarm of angry bees, I can't help but to think about them intelligences, the raw power that shaped the world. It's a humbling thought that we're all a part of something bigger than ourselves." The conversation flowed like a mountain stream, winding its way through topics as diverse as the stars in the sky. They talked of faith and doubt, of science and spirituality, of the mysteries of the universe and the wonders of the natural world. The saloon, with its raucous laughter and clinking glasses, faded into the background as three men lost themselves in their shared curiosity. As the night wore on, Jack felt a kinship with these men, a bond forged not by shared beliefs or backgrounds, but by a mutual respect for the wildness that surrounded them. They were men of the mountains, each in their own way, drawn to the solitude and the challenge of a life lived on the edge. With the last dregs of whiskey drained and the hour growing late, the three men shook hands, a silent promise to cross paths again someday. As Jack and old Joe stepped out into the crisp night air, the stars twinkling like diamonds scattered across the velvet sky. They carried with them more than just supplies for the winter. They carried the warmth of newfound friendship and the lingering echoes of a conversation that had touched their souls. The next morning, as they rode back towards their mountain haven, the crunch of leaves beneath their horses' hooves a symphony of autumn. Jack couldn't help but marvel at the strange and wonderful tapestry of life. In the heart of the Rockies, where the mountains scraped the heavens and the wind whispered secrets to the pines, he had found a connection to the world and its infinite stories that he had never known before.